So today we're going to be discussing the Battle of Alesia. This takes place in 52 BC. Now, Battle of Alesia. Who's there? Julius Caesar of Rome and the Gothic tribes commanded by Vercingetorix. Now, I've heard it pronounced multiple ways, Vercingetorix and Vercingetorix. Now, I don't know the pronoun. Please forgive me. Some of these names are very old and I don't speak the language of that country. So now, Vercingetorix is a Gothic and he comes from Gaul in that area. Now, Gallic, not Gothic, Gallic, forgive me, Gallic chieftain. And he was appointed sole supreme commander, however you want to put it, head chief, head honcho of the tribes in this area of Gaul. And this was because Rome was going to force an annexation of them. And this is just a series of years that Rome was just leading up to take over, and they're pushing their influence on their country, on the area, on their tribe, on their people. And Rome at this time was really putting them under harsh conditions, which was forcing them into war. And Rome knew this. So, I mean, it also comes to the fact that Julius Caesar would come and he knew that if he made war with this tribe, this people, he could become victorious. And in doing so, he would be able to carve his name in the history books, take over Rome as consul forever. There's a whole series of things. Julius Caesar was a very ambitious person. So Gaul was just a stepping stone for him. And one thing he saw with and Gaul was an area that was ready, that he saw in his eyes for Rome. Now, Vercingetorix, leader, pointed out amongst all the tribes, had a very large army, and now his army is based of mainly warriors, and it's not a professional army, so their tactics are going to be very different. But he is able, according to because a lot of these manuscripts, what we're getting, come from Julius Caesar's book he writes on this. Now, the problem is the book he writes, we don't know how much of it is propaganda, how much he twisted into his favor, what he says here and there, because things always get twisted. The victor writes the history books. And in this case, it's very true. Now, we can see many things take place at this battle. It is one of the important battles that would shape the future of Rome and Julius Caesar's future. Now, roughly 70,000 Roman troopers under Julius Caesar with 80. Now, the enemy, Vercingetorix, of the Gauls had apparently around 80,000 infantry to 15,000 cavalry. And some estimates up to 250,000. So, right there, we don't know the true number of his forces. Is that camp followers included in that number? Or is that total fighting soldiers? Is that number estimated? Is that just a roundup to make yourself sound more victorious? Yeah, you don't know. So at this battle, it's very interesting how it takes place because it's a siege within a siege, meaning there's one army that's surrounded by another army essentially the Gauls' army's at the core, and it's being surrounded by 25 miles worth of walls by the Romans. And then on the outside, the Gauls surrounded that. So it's multiple rings. It's a lot of pressure. A siege within a siege. Now, prior to this battle, the Gauls were using scorched earth tactics. Numidian tactics is what they were said to use. Vercingetorix was using scorched earth to try to play out the Roman army because he knew they were dependent on their food resources in Gaul. They weren't getting heavy supplies from Rome. Julius Caesar was at this time unpopular, and the Roman Senate was not trying to supply him heavily, so he had to rely on everything on his own. He got small supplies here and there, but mainly he had a forge for his supplies on the villages. Now, separates the army from the two. What separates the Romans? Before we get deeper into the battle, the Roman legionnaire is trained on how to fight how the Romans fight, supplied and equipped by the Romans. The, the Gauls are loose tribal bands that are all grouped together. So they have different ideologies. Training tactics are different. Equipment, they all come up on their own. Individual soldiers. But that can be an advantage or a disadvantage, depending on how you fight. One of the major things that the Romans have on their side is their ability to build forts on the war campaign. They build a fort that night and be able to have defenses. The second thing is the war machines that they're able to produce. The ballistas, the catapults, the trebuchets, if you must, when they're sieging forts or even in pitched battles. Quite marvelous works they're able to produce with those war machines. They're very unique because the Gauls weren't using these. They're using more of guerrilla tactics. Now, I'm not saying one side is better than the other, but what I am saying is who can employ their side of tactics and strategy over the enemy will be victorious and superior. Who can do it better? So war is who can do it better? Who's better supplied? Logistics. If you have a 250,000 man army and your logistics are terrible, you can't keep them in one fort in one location for long because the foraging will run out. Logistics. Now, so the siege takes place. There's a couple little streams that run through this area of Alesia that run through the fort, but the Romans start to dam it up so they can't get water into in the area that's being sieged. So if you have no water, it's tough to fight if you're thirsty. You're dehydrated. The only thing you think about is water, not fighting. And the outsiding force of, well, they said 250,000 men on the outside, sieging the Romans. Now there's, from what we're heard of, there's three major attempts to break through the lines. Three major fights. And during this battle, or this siege, it's very difficult because it's said that when Julius Caesar himself thought all was lost and was engaging in hand-to-hand fighting himself on some of the walls, his men fought even harder because they seen him fighting, right? Warrior king type shit. Now, when you have a sieging army without outside sieging another army, and they're trying a rescue mission, if you must, the coordination and the communication between the two are cut off. So how do you get through the walls? Dig tunnels, build catapults, things to break their wall are those, right? Major earthbounds are built. There's a lot of back and forth that is happening between the two. The Gauls would charge the walls, try to break through. They would break through in several instances, but they didn't have enough coordination to continue that drive and continue the breakout. And they'd hit it from all sides at once. When you have 250,000 men, and then you have another 80,000 inside, I think you would win. That's the coordination. Logistics are kind of off right now. Communication is key. And the Romans knew they just had to outlast their enemy. The three major attempts to break through the walls fail. The Julius Caesar, after this battle, this battle was the major point in the war. This battle will determine who wins and loses, essentially. And the Gauls lost. Vercingetorix was comes a very famous after this battle. There's a very famous painting that comes out where Vercingetorix is on a white horse, if I remember, throwing his sword down at the feet of the victor, Julius Caesar, and he's standing there or sitting there. It's very tough to defeat yourself when you throw the feet down at you. You're accepting it. Vercingetorix would be, oh man, that's tough, especially admitting defeat like that, knowing you condemn your people have lost, enslaved. A lot to think about. This battle was just essentially who could stand there the longest. It wasn't major tacticians going in around maneuvering here and there. It wasn't that. It was who could hold the field the longest and who had the best abilities to withstand the siege. That's all it was. Who could grit it out the longest. That was the Romans. Well, that's it for today. Like and subscribe. Check us out on Rumble. Till next time.